A very good morning to you. You are watching Newsline this morning with me, Chathuranga Hapuarachchi. Now, people of our country are talking about three particular points these days. One is the checks received by 118 politicians from perpetual treasuries, or the ill-gotten gains of the bond scam. The other one is the Al Jazeera documentary about the cricket corruption in our country. And the other one is the 2020 presidential election and who will be the candidates for these three, from the three main camps. Now, I have here with me Mr. Keerthi Tennakoon, a very vocal civil society activist who has been on our show many times and who has been a part of many programs to speak on what is important to the people. Before we go to the three main points that I raised about Mr. Tennakoon, now you are on the island today for making a statement about the CEB and the problems it has, the engineering trade unions has with the PUCSL, the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka. Now, this issue has been ongoing. We have to talk about a lot of topics today since you are here. But before we get to that, why is this issue there? And do we have to face a power crisis because of this tug of war between two institutions?
Don't forget the fact that this tug of war is not the electricity crisis in Sri Lanka. There's a power crisis. Everyone has predicted it for 5 long years now. And we have not addressed the issue. We have not managed to build power plants here and generate power in a cheaper way. But here, the tug of war between the PUCSL and the electricity board and the ministry, particular, especially the minister, state minister and the secretary is playing with the electricity engineers union, and that has caused so much of issues here. The cost of the coal and the cost per unit for the coal power generation is always a question mark. Some says it's 7 rupees. When I try to say it was, try to quote the PUCSL, it was 14 rupees. But here, I mean, no one knows the exact amount, but they are still saying 7 rupees is the basic cost, which is totally utter lie. And based on now there's trade union action going on, which is not benefited for any of the people. The taxpayers are paying something like 11 rupees per unit. That means your and my money, the money of the taxpayers are taking out 11 rupees per unit from every household. This is the biggest corruption case in Sri Lanka. It is far beyond imagination now, and we have to take action. And the ministers, the government has addressed this issue, but they have failed in action. We should have some proper investigation into this. The academics, the other people, the professionals has to do an independent calculation on this and address the issue. This is the only way out of this crisis. But now, at the moment, power generation, whether it's a coal, whether it's a diesel, emergency power, it has given huge benefits to some selected politicians and some public servants here.
When you say the Constitutional Council of this country has turned a blind eye into this issue between PUCSL and the CEB trade union, what do you actually mean, Mr. Tennakoon?
No, I mean, now what we have seen during the last week or so, there are posters are pasted on the walls. Most of these posters are pasted by the Electrical Engineers Union using the government resources, state resources, without the printer's name, without the publisher's name, which is violating of the basic law of the land. Right. And the police is taking a blind eye on this. Even though, I mean, the Engineers Union is doing this, I mean, they cannot remove the commission. It was commissioned by the Constitutional Council. So, I mean, even the Sri Lankan Prime Minister can be removed with a simple majority. But to remove the council, you need 113 votes at least.
To remove the commission.
Yeah. So, they have to be a proper approach. So, I spoke to this engineers union, some of the members down there, and I spoke to the Speaker, Honorable Karu Jayasuriya, on this. Even Honorable Karu Jayasuriya has not received even a letter. And now the posters are everywhere. So what does it mean? I mean, if we are seriously addressing this issue, if it is a serious trade union action, at least they have to communicate officially to the relevant authority. In this case, the Constitution Council. It has to go to the Speaker. So, the Speaker can put it on the agenda, and then they can discuss and get some serious action if they are really serious. Or otherwise, what we have to do is that, I mean, what they are doing to do, they want to remove the DG of the PCSL. So that's very simple. I mean, is this the proper way to do that? I think we are in a definite crisis. We are in a constitutional crisis in a sense when it comes to this particular thing. And this is thuggery. This is thuggery and nothing else. If you are continuously losing the money, and if you are using power to show that to get things done, I think that's a crime. That's simply a crime and nothing else.
Mr. Tennakoon, very quickly coming back to the topic that we promised that we'll discuss, the money that went into the hands of the politicians through the bond scam. Now, I remember you yourself spoke about this extensively from the beginning of the year, especially when this happened and when information came out to light to say that several politicians had obtained money. Now we know that the President's Secretary is saying he promises to inquire into the allegations made by MP Dayasiri Jayasekara, a former minister, with regard to this money going to the hands of the politicians. What do you think now as to what has come out, and how will this go forward?
I mean, after handing over the special commission report to the President and the Presidential Secretariat, we saw that more than 5,000 pages were missing. And when we raised this issue, I mean, everyone tried to cover it up. And finally, I mean, there's no way the Presidential Secretariat could cover it up, as it was much more than 5,000 pages. So we continuously try to push the pressure on this. In January 20th, 22nd, we raised this issue. On January 23rd, the President admits that there are more pages on this. So after that, after putting that particular pressure, only, I mean, the Presidential Secretariat sent those documents to the Parliament. But here, very interestingly, not like the other, original report, these documents have never seen by the public or the parliamentarian. I mean, it was given to the parliamentarian, but they didn't disclose it. So it is not a public document, accessible public document to the people of the country. So we are having an issue. But when I wrote to the Presidential Secretariat about this particular thing, I have mentioning very specific documents what the country should know. This is one of these documents. And we know the CID had an investigation, and from that investigation some names came out. Everyone believed that that particular number is somewhere close to 118 names. So we know one of them are Dayasiri Jayasekara. There are additional parliamentarians. For our knowledge, at least it could reach to, somewhere up to 16 in number.
16 parliamentarians.
16 parliamentarian plus, it seems, and some politicians, and some journalists, some civil society organizations, and some religious leaders, I'll say.
Let me get that straight. 16 parliamentarians, politicians, journalists, civil
activists, and the religious leaders. So, I mean, this was talked about for something like 16 months, 6 months, 6 long months now. And all of a sudden, Dayasiri Jayasekara parliamentarian's name came out. So are we going to wait for another 1.5 years until the next election is announced to get the other 17 names out of this? So what is the fairness of that? So we should know what is happening. And on the other hand, when you look into the broader picture of this treasury bond issue, now we know almost 2 years has gone past after the second COPE report has come in, which voluntarily the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has referred to the Aegis Department. Nothing is anything happened on this. In the other hand, so it was almost 6 long months after it was handed over to the President now. So, I mean, is there anything visible has happened? I mean, we know that the Aloysius and the Pasun Palisena is down there behind in the remand, behind the bars, I mean, in the remand custody. And the other hand, we know now the main man accused of is down there. The politicians who received the money and the additional people is freely roaming here and there and making decisions, and we are the lawmakers here in this case. So they try to cover them up. Don't forget the fact it is not just only the government politicians, but the opposition politicians has got money. So then that's why it is not coming out to the public now. Like I was got to know that from Ranjan Ramanayak, the honorable parliamentarian on this, he had some communications with the president. I think president has to speak it loud and very clearly said what has happened, and if there is a reason, in January 23rd, he said, I mean, just because of the investigations, he is delaying these some of the documents. So I mean, how long the government, Sri Lankan investigators, and the other people to try to cover these names?
So, Mr. Tennakoon, basically what you're trying to say is that now 6 months have gone since these documents have gone to the president. Now it's high time that they act and reveal whoever this is to the people. But if there are politicians, parliamentarians and all sorts of people in this particular list of money, people who took money, this can work as a system to protect each other. They can work together and protect each other.
That's exactly what is happening at the moment. We know it is not just the perpetual treasurer's account, and in the same time, why central bank freezed some of the Mendes company, the distilleries company and the subsidiary of that got freezed just because of these particular allegations. So just because of allegations, they won't freeze account itself, and they allow to operate it in a given under given strict guidelines. Now we should know from the central bank, we should know from the investigators, we should know from the police, and if these documents are available with the presidential secretariat, we, the country, should know what and who are the people at least alleged on.
Mr. Tennakoon, are you trying to say that all of these bodies that you just mentioned, the investigators, the lawmaking authorities, so on and so forth, have in a way tried to deceive the people of the country?
I mean, it was much talked about issue now. But here, when you look into the broader perspective, what has happened? The people of the country see something has happened. I don't think so. For me, for a person who fought against for almost 3.5 years now, we don't see the results. Its results are not visible. And some people see that it has not happened. They pretended like this sort of a thing has not happened. It's a once in a while it comes out. Why and when it comes out? I mean, when Dayasri Jayasekara, the minister, was down there in the government, it was not highlighted. Now, the moment he left the government, it was much highlighted. But here, there are some other people who are still with the opposition, still with the government, who had taken money. And that list is available. And the other hand, they have done, I mean, there must be investigations on that. You just blindly make allegations. But how long we have to wait for the additional 117 names is the biggest question mark, I'll say.
Mr. Tennakoon, moving on to our next point. Now, we also know, as we mentioned at the outset, that the Sri Lanka cricket has also embroiled in turmoil, if I may put it that way. A lot of attention there, a lot of heat being diverted there. Now we know that the Bribery Commission says that the act will be amended to involve corruption in Sri Lanka cricket as a punishable offence as well. Now, all of these institutions, key institutions in our country, Sri Lanka cricket is a passion more than in our country. But all of these institutions are looking to be corrupt.
I mean, when you look into the Al Jazeera allegations, which they have done for 1.5 years, the investigation part, and it was an international sort of operation. It was not isolated from Sri Lanka or India or England. It was, I mean, everywhere. It was an international network which have done that particular operation. So getting isolated Sri Lankan cricket won't help. So it should be some sort of an international operation, an international organization has to do this. But this is not the first time these sort of allegations came on Sri Lankan cricketers, Sri Lankan cricket administration, curators, and don't forget the fact in the much talked about Gold Cricket Stadium, Jayananda Varnavira at that particular time, curator, did not help the investigators in the ICC who came to investigate the anti-corruption issue in related to that. So, I mean, have we taken enough measurements ensuring the transparency and some sort of workable anti-corruption measurements to address that issue? I mean, here the bribery and corruption, I won't take anything out of them, but here, are they really capable of, investigating this sort of multinational, internationally involved and mafia involved sort of exercise is my biggest question.
When they can't handle corruption and bribery inside the country.
Yes, I mean, just go to the Treasury Board issue. The Bribery and Corruption Commission is the prime organization who did the best investigation on the bond issue, and still that report has not published. They have not taken action, so they have failed on this. So they have to build some sort of credibility on these issues.
But this is a good angle to take, involving if there is corruption at any given institution in our country, the Bribery Commission has to have the power to act on it.
Definitely, I mean, definitely Bribery Commission must have some sort of a power to act on that. There's no doubt about it. But here we are having a corrupt system. Unless we are going to change the system itself to some sort of a way, I mean, we don't have any hope. Now, see, I mean, for the anti-corruption front, CAFE and CHR, the Center for Human Rights and Research, we have filed more than 371 cases in alleging with all the documentation, and only 70 plus has been inquired so far, and only 16 has gone to the Aegis Department level. Only 4 cases has gone to the courts now. So, I mean, if this is the speed what the corruption investigators and the Aegis Department and the judiciary is doing for last 3.5 years, I mean, how long we have to wait for this sort of very big operation to be successful?
Ms. Tennakoon, I saw an interesting status that you had uploaded on Facebook this morning about this particular issue, how Sri Lanka should take some advice from Malaysia in terms of tackling corruption. You had mentioned this particular politician's name as well, Minister Duminda Disanayake. Now I want to take your attention to there as well. In 5 days, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad has been able to arrest 9 ministers, shut down the airspace so that the corrupt politicians don't go out, arrest about 144 businessmen, so on and so forth. This government has been in power for over 3 years. What has happened?
I mean, from the day one, to be fair to Mahathir, from the first minute, I mean, they started the operation on the first minute, and they was really successful with getting the people into the books. The issue what we faced in Sri Lanka was that when the election results, I could still remember what happened on January 9th, early morning. When we got to know that the Rajapaksa regime was defeated, I mean, it was, to our utter surprise that, the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe went to the temple trees and had some discussions with and facilitating the Rajapaksas to go out. And that particular exercise continued for almost 3.5 years now. And I won't say, when we look into the investigations, the manner and the way the politicians inside the parliament, outside the parliament, and the dedication of the politicians, the will of the politicians to get them out of the crisis, rather than sorting out this in a just and fair manner, has not happened.
Mr. Tennakoon, now we remember how we saw recently how vast amount of money, even Sri Lankan rupees, was even found at Malaysia's former Prime Minister's Now, when these matters are being taken under the government, they go directly from the place it was arrested to the place it's supposed to go, the court of law or any other institution. In Sri Lanka, do you think things like that happen? You know, very, very transparently, the matter gets arrested and then arrives at the law and order or the agency that is required. Especially, let me just ask you a casual example. Maybe the bond report. Did it directly go from the printer to the president, or did it go somewhere else in between?
That's one particular big question now we have raised for last 6 months, and which has not been answered. It seems like, I mean, the political willness, I mean, the political motivation to get the culprit into the books has not happened. And that's the biggest failure. You look into the power crisis, you look into the coal mafia, you look into the energy power sector, bond scam, there are other various allegations which is coming against the present politicians and the officials. We are doubting whether we are ever going to see the justice.
Mr. Tennakoon, now coming to keeping this aside for a while, the country needs another election to come in soon. The provincial council elections promised in...
Provincial council elections was due last September. Don't forget the fact.
But up to date we have not seen. Like the local government elections, there seems to be a massive delay in this. And as you are also an election monitor, you are heavily involved in the election matters in our country. What do you think, when do you think the country will see a provincial council election?
So this is the biggest issue, I think, now when you are talking about the universal franchise and all that. Provincial council elections basically comes into the universal franchise. Now, at the moment, Eastern, North Central, and Sabaragamu elections were delayed. And we now, based on the amended Provincial Council Act, the delimitation report has now submitted to the Parliament. But it has not gone for the vote. I mean, if that particular delimitation report can get 2/3 majority, definitely it will be act. So then the election commission, then only the election commission can call, go ahead and call for the provincial council elections for the delayed councils. In the other hand, by October 23rd, there will be 28th. There will be 6 provincial councils out of 9 due elections. How long the government and the political parties can delay these elections further? I mean, there's no way to do this. I mean, we can understand the setback the government, the Hapuarachchi government, UNP and the SLFP who had with these elections, the local council elections. But just because of that, you cannot delay the elections deliberately. And that's exactly what the present government is doing, which is not fair. I mean, tomorrow we mark, the day after tomorrow we mark the Voters' Day. I mean, this is a Voters' Day which the Sri Lankan people exercise without an election, without holding the election, without reaching to the universal franchise and all that. In the other hand, the people are not reacting to that. I think, but my feeling is that the election commission and the election monitors are the only ones who need the elections. We are the only ones who are campaigning for that. The government parties, the opposition. It was very surprising that even the poor people, the opposition who can have a fair chance, they are not campaigning for this. This is a shame. How long the elections should delay just because of the politicians don't need it?
Mr. Tennakoon, now corruption, and we can go on for hours and hours talking about the corruption levels in our country. Now, in addition, we have Sri Lanka cricket to worry about as well. Taking all of this into consideration, keeping the fact that the political parties are also finding it difficult to go on because they have internal issues. Now, we saw a newspaper article today to say right here that the UNP will appoint new members to its working committee. This is said by Minister Akila Viraj Karyawasam. Political turmoil within these parties, they are not doing anything for the people, are they? They are just worried about.
No, they are. I mean, all these three parties now, basically the UNP, SLFP, and Puhuttu, all of them are having internal political issues, party political issues more than anything else, and they are only addressing that. Akhil Viraj Karivasam, the General Secretary of the UNP, has already announced the UNP candidate for the 2020 presidential election. So, what is the point appointing the new, what is the benefit the government or the ordinary citizens of the country of appointing these people? I mean, it won't change anything. In the other hand, we are having a bigger problem. The UNP parliamentarians are trying to persuade the working committee. They want the voting rights to elect their leadership, which is not given.
Ms. Tennakoon, I find what you're saying about this Bond Commission report very interesting. A lot of new information that I personally didn't know about. Now, I want to ask you another question about the Bond Commission report and how things unfolded. According to your knowledge, do you know of any relatives known by the suspects maybe, who are involved in drafting or had control over this Bond Commission report?
I don't know, but here the scale and the vastness of the issue, I mean, that sort of scenario, I won't surprise if that sort of a scenario will unfolded within no time. There was so much of suspicious. I mean, basically, some of the names who has received money is having very big links with some journalists and some influential people, the civil society, for example.
You also mentioned a religious leader as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have to wait for the list now. It is waiting time, and I don't know how long we have to wait for that. So, the moment if we can have at least the telephone numbers who has had regular communications with these people, for example Arjuna Aloysius plus the Kasunpali Sena, that particular marked document is down with the Presidential Secretariat, and everyone knows it. So, if that particular documents count out, if that particular telephone numbers came out, then everyone can understand how vast, how deep this crisis is.
Mr. Tennakoon, finally now, with 3 minutes remaining in our program, I want to ask you, the objective of the Bond Commission was to shed light into what has happened, to clarify to the people of this country as to what has happened and how the money has gone. But from what you are saying, it looks like it has done the exact opposite.
Definitely. I mean, here, from the day one, the 2 days after what has happened, the media was talking to this, and Sivas and the MTV was the pioneer of that, and we start talking. This 5 days after the particular incident, we had the very basic information, what is the malpractice and how much it might have cost. It's a basic understanding. And then this exposure does not, it repeated for the second time.
Yes.
So, is there anything happen far beyond that? But here, when a crime took place or a crime is happening, the first thing we should do is to prevent another thing happening like that. But here, this is a country, we are continuously with the crime related to the financial industries, financial institutions, from treasury bond, from coal, from electricity board, X, Y, Z, that particular thing is keep on counting. Now, for most of these people, the bond issue has just gone forgotten, and now the electricity board thing has come out, and we are talking one after another. How far this country can go like this if we are not putting brakes on this corruption issue? In the other hand, now the politicians directly getting involved. For example, the CEB issue, the Prime Minister, the President, the Ministers directly getting involved with this particular thing, and then goes against the, fighting, even they are ready to fight against the Constitutional Council on this. Is this fair, is our question.
Mr. Tennakoon, thank you very much for being here with us this morning and talking to us. Key takeaways, how will the country move forward if we do not put brakes into the corruption is the question that Mr. Tennakoon is asking the politicians and the general public. So once again, thank you, Mr. Tennakoon. I wish I had more time to talk with you, but that's all we have for today. Mr. Farah Shaukat Ali will be joining you tomorrow with another interesting guest like Mr. Tennakoon. Thank you very much for watching.